Hello, I'm jdawgg, and this is going to be my second part to my using the editor tutorial. You should have watched my first one. If you're new to mapping, go ahead and watch the other one, my first one, because that shows you how to move around your views and move your camera and all that good stuff. So right now you should know how to cycle through your views, how to paint a brush, and how to move brushes around, delete things, select things, etc. So the first thing, this tutorial is going to cover the basics to making your first room, alright? So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to just draw out a brush, and it doesn't have to be anything specifically, any specific height, just a little FYI. If you scroll in here and you look, 128 is my height right there, alright? 128 units tall is a good size for a one-story building, just generally speaking, with Call of Duty anyway. I'm right-clicking, going to actors. I'm going to drop one in because you're going to always need an actor when mapping. No matter how good you get, you need some kind of a perspective. And so now you can see about how tall this room is going to be compared to my actor. Alright, there we go. Right now it's painting it with this blue and black grid. Alright, that's bad because just that's the texture. It's no texture actually that it uses when you first start mapping. So go up here to textures and go to common, and I have my brush selected, and you're just going to scroll down and apply the caulking texture to it. Caulk. There we go. And that's what you're going to do mapping with. Whenever you're painting out new rooms, do it in caulk first. Reason being, once you actually texture the room, you're going to want, you might want some of the faces of the brush to be caulked. And the reason why is your graphics card will not actually draw the texture in game if it says caulk on it. And think about it, the bottom of this building you're never going to see, right? Because it's going to be sitting on like grass. So why would I have a texture applied to this? Why would I use up the player's computer resources when they're not even seeing it? It's still being drawn though. So when I go ahead and texture this building, I'm going to texture everything except for underneath. And if underneath is caulk, like I said, it won't draw it. So I just ran into this room and into this building, and there's nothing on the inside of it, right? Because all this is one solid piece with 6 faces. All right, there is no inside yet. We have to make the inside. Now there's 2 ways to making your first room. I'm going to show you the easy and effective and permissible way. There's nothing wrong with the hollow button. And right now, all the other mappers are going, "What's he doing? He's showing how to use the hollow button. This guy's crazy. Wow, what a stupid guy." There's nothing wrong with the hollow tool, and it frustrates me when people give me flack for teaching how to use this. It's built into the software development kit. All right, the developers made these tools with this button built in. Obviously, it works. There's nothing wrong with it. Where people go wrong and they start having troubles with it is when they try to use these CSG functions on complex brushes. So they'll take a hexagon and then they'll use the CSG subtract on like this weird or triangular prism, and that's when it causes troubles because it splits it up into a million pieces. You'll understand. I'll get to the CSG subtract button later. Right now, the hollow is a CSG function. There's nothing wrong with it. All it's going to do is split this brush into 6 brushes. Keep that in mind. I click it. There we go. You can tell it did something. It might be hard to really notice what it did, but it just split this up into 6 brushes. Alright, if I run inside of it, there's an interior. 4 walls, and a ceiling and a floor. Alright? And they're all intersecting. That's important to note. When you're working with structures, be on grid 8, alright? Most mapping, like rooms, I mean, grid 8 is a good size for a wall, thickness of a wall. It's a good grid to work on. Work on that right now. And there we go. All this is another brush, alright? If I take this wall, or this roof, this ceiling, and I duplicate it by hitting spacebar, that's a button you need to get used to, is spacebar copies. Alright, I copied the ceiling, I put it over here. If I drag this ceiling down, I have that original brush, right? This is what I started with, this is what I finished with. So the hollow button doesn't do anything except for split it up into 6 small brushes. Now over here, we're going to go ahead to the top view, we're going to make the same exact thing right now. I'm going to come down to my front view, I'm going to bring this up as thin as it can get, which is 8 unit, or on a grid 8 is 1 unit. Alright, spacebar to duplicate it. I'm going to bring it down to the same level as this other floor. And now I have the ceiling and the floor. Same exact thing as right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. And up here we have our rotating buttons. These are perfectly fine to use. If I flip it on the Z, I can flip it on the Z axis. Alright, I can rotate. I can rotate it on the Y axis, which is what I want. And you can also rotate it on the X axis. Alright, and then you can flip them as well. But it's hard to tell exactly what it's doing since there's no real texture on it. So I want to actually rotate this on the Y axis. And I'm going to bring it over. I'm making the wall right now. I'm going to drag it down, resizing it. And there we go. Duplicate that. Make the parallel wall. Duplicate that. I'm going to rotate it along the Y-axis. Nope, along the Z-axis. I mean, that's the way you go. Sometimes it's hard to tell which perspective you got to use, so you click a button. If it's not the right one, hit Control Z to undo it. Alright, it's a little trick. Go to my top view, I'll bring it over here. Resize it. Copy it. There we go. And I have the same exact product on this side as I did over here. This was making it using the hollow button. This is making it brush by brush. So what I'm trying to get the point across is the hollow button simply breaks it up for you. See how long it took me to make this one over here and how quickly this one over here was made? Alright, this one was over here with one click of a button. So there's nothing wrong with the hollow button. It just makes brushes, okay? That's all it does. Now I'm going to go ahead and drag my actor on the inside. Alright, here we are on the inside. Now the first thing you need to take note of is you're going to get Z fighting with textures, and it's hard to explain without showing you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply textures right now. I selected all the walls by shift left clicking. I'm going to go to textures, Normandy walls. I'm going to apply this brick texture. So for some reason there's going to be brick on the inside of your building. Better yet, I'm going to reselect all these. I'm going to apply just some wallpaper. There we go. Alright, now for the ceiling, well, I'm going to go to the floor first. I'm going to go textures, Normandy floors. And the floor I'm going to make wood. There we go. And then the ceiling, I'm going to go to textures, Normandy ceiling. And sometimes there's not really good ceiling textures. I guess that works. It doesn't really work if you want this to be a civilized house, so sometimes you have to look around. I know that in textures industrial, we got some good textures that work for ceilings. If I scroll down here, you just got to look around. Just because it's not indexed as a ceiling doesn't mean you can't use it. Alright, so those are some pretty good ones. There we go. We can have a white ceiling. It's a little bit too white. There we go. Alright, it works. Now we have our walls, our floor, and our ceiling that's textured. If we come onto the outside here, I'm going to texture this wall something different. So we have all the walls with this nice wall border, wallpaper, except for this one, which is cement. Now, right now, it looks like everything's fine. It's just, obviously the textures don't match. They don't work, but there's nothing weird going on. But if I come to the outside and I move around, look at these corners here. We got the floor morphed in with this wall here, first of all, and it's called Z fighting. The two textures are both trying to occupy the same space, and so you get that little flickering when you move. When you're in game, you will see that. Same thing with this wall. You will see all that flickering in game, and it's horrible. Alright, now the simple solution, I'm not even going to show you, because it's bad. Alright, first thing first though, the ceiling does it as well, right? The ceiling and the floor, they're intersecting. It's because you can see right here, they're plainly intersecting. We got our wall, we got our ceiling. So the easiest way is raise the ceiling up 1 unit, take the floor, and lower it down 1 unit. And now the ceiling and the wall and the floor and the wall are no longer Z fighting. Doesn't take care of the corners. Corners are a little bit more complex, but it's not that bad. take each wall individually, just shift left click to select it, press E, and it brings up all the faces of the brush with blue dots in the wireframe window. What you want to do is you want to take the innermost blue dot on each end of the wall. We're in the top view. Alright, you're just going to take the one closest to the center of the room, which is this one, and just drag it in at a 45-degree angle so it's pointing in towards the center of the room. Do the same thing for the other end. You'll just drag it to the opposite, other direction. You're dragging it in on itself. Deselect. Take the adjacent wall, hit E, pull it in. And right here, this corner is already done. Right there, we got a nice intersection at a 45-degree angle, as opposed to this corner, which it's a box because they're all intersecting. So right now, this corner I said is fixed. If we come to the outside, there's no more Z fighting. You can clearly see two different textures, and they're not trying to occupy the same space. Whereas over here, well, you're not going to tell. Over here, they are trying to occupy the same space. Alright? So, anyway, that wall is done. This wall over here, press E, 45-degree angle. This wall, E. Whoops, I dragged it too far. Just drag it back. There we go. Lastly, there we go. Now, every single corner, when you're looking at the top view, merge, and they don't really merge, they just come flush up against each other at 45-degree angles, right? And now on the outside of all these corners, there's no more Z fighting. The floor is not Z fighting with anything, the ceiling's not Z fighting, and all the corners are fine. Alright? You got to do that with every room you make, every interior. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems when you start making the exterior of your map. Alright? Now, texturing, as you see on the outside of this building, what's the deal? I got this wallpaper on the outside of the house. Now, think about this. If this is a real map, we have grass and rolling hills and trees. The outside of a building is going to be concrete or wood or brick, right? It's not going to be this. This is an interior texture. Alright? The reason why it got the outside as well is because I shift left clicked and I applied the texture to the whole brush. Now, if you remember, these are just simple brushes. So if I apply texture to it, it's going to apply it to all sides of it. If I want to apply texture to just one face, you control shift and left click. Alright? And now you see the inside is selected, the outside is not. Alright? It's not going to show up in the wireframe window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift select everything. I'm going to go to my textures common again. That's textures custom. Textures common. And I'm going to find my caulk. That's C-A-U-L-K, caulk. And I just basically retextured everything with the caulking. And again, I already explained how the video card won't draw that. Now I'm going to control shift left click on all of these walls. There we go. Outsides are not selected. I'm going to go to textures, Normandy, walls again. And on the inside, I'm going to apply that texture. I hit escape. Notice it did not apply it on the outside. Now, this texture aligned nicely to this wall. It's perfect because this wall is 128 units tall. Right? So it's because the texture is designed to fit 128 units tall. Odds are textures really aren't going to line up this nicely when you're actually mapping, but I'll have an advanced texturing tutorial later on. Control shift left click for the floor, and I'm going to texture this with Normandy floors. I don't like it. There we go. Alright, ceiling, control shift left click, textures, Normandy, ceiling. There's not a very wide selection of ceilings, and none of them fit the mood of this interior. You'd think of this house as being a civilized house, not a burnout, rotting one, right? So I'm going to go to textures, Normandy, walls again. Probably not walls. Yeah, I'm probably thinking of floors. And just because it says it's indexed as a floor doesn't mean you have to use it on the floor. I can use that on the ceiling. And I'll just use this wooden texture for the ceiling. There we go. Alright? Now on the outside, everything's still cocked, because right now, the map that I'm showing you how to make is a completely indoor map. It's just this one room. So why are we going to make your video card draw a texture, which you're never going to see? That's the logic behind it. Now we got a room and it's textured. It looks like a room. It looks like you should be able to step inside of this and walk around. And you almost will be. Alright? That's the basics to making your first room. We'll stop here. It's already too long because I talk a lot. But now you know how to make. You know how to make your first room. You don't know how to spawn in, and the reason why I'm not showing you how to spawn in is because you're going to have to learn how to compile, and that's a whole other technique. So the last thing I will show you before I stop this is how to get in your spawn points. You couldn't just get in here. Now, you can leave the actor there because in a multiplayer map, actors won't show up. You can have as many as you want. Now, if you right-click in the 2D window and you go down to MP, you gotta have all the spawns. Now, what you need, we're gonna make this deathmatch compatible, okay? So if we get this deathmatch underscore spawn in here, there it is. I can move it around by left-clicking on it in the middle. This is an entity, so you can left-click on the outside of it. You cannot resize it. It's okay. Just drag it around, and I'm gonna put it in this corner over here. And this is important with spawn points. Always leave it at least 1 unit above the ground and 1 unit away from all walls. Reason being, you could unintentionally spawn morphed into the floorboards, and you don't want that. So that's 1 unit above the ground on a grid 8, and there we go. If you press the letter N, you'll bring up your entity. With it selected, you bring up your entity window, and then you can click on these little buttons down here to change the angle that it's facing. You can see the arrow in the 2D window. I want them to spawn in angled like that. And you just hit escape to close out of the entity window, escape to deselect that. And when you spawn in, you're just going to be looking like that. Alright? Map still won't work. Even if you compile it, not going to work. You got to right click again, go to MP, you got to put a deathmatch intermission. Deathmatch intermission. There we go. It's pink. All your intermissions are pink. And again, leave this away from the walls as well. And intermissions generally go up towards the top of the map because I press N, make sure it's facing that way. Because what this intermission is, when you know how when you first load into Carentan, it's overlooking the front street, the main street. That's because when you first join the server, you're looking at the intermission spawn point. That's all it is. So without it, you wouldn't be able to select the weapon and spawn into your actual spawn point. All right. Now, after we compile the map, we would be able to test it. So we're going to go ahead and save this map as tutorial room. Save. Alright. I hope you enjoyed, and tune into my next tutorial, which will show you how to compile and test your first map. Hope that helped.